Okay, welcome everyone to our program tonight. My name is Allison Carmola and I am a librarian at the Beatley Central Library. Tonight we are going to be having a program, Stop Budgeting, a values-based approach to a balanced life, presented by Jessica Medina. So thank you for joining us, and Jessica, if you'd like to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Allison. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yes, we are going to be talking about stopping the budgeting and using values to really figure out how to figure out a balanced life for you and for your spending. Just a few logistical points on tonight's presentation. This is being recorded. So number one, we will be opening up the presentation for questions at the end. You will be able to unmute yourselves once Allison releases that power to you. So when we're all done, you can save your questions and I'll try to go through as many as we have time for. Also, this will be posted on the library's YouTube channel. So if you miss anything, don't worry, the recording will be posted. And if you would like a copy of the slides, there's going to be an email address at the end of the presentation for Alexandria Library, and you can contact them to get your very own copy of the slides. So lots of resources in here, and we have a lot to cover today, so I'm going to take it away. So we're going to be covering balanced budget basics. We're going to go through the idea of values-based spending. We're going to talk about how you get your budget into balance, how you keep it in balance, and we'll talk a little bit about resources, and then of course, save some time for questions at the end. Who is this presentation for? Hopefully the people who are here, anyone who hates budgeting. If you feel like you have to spend a lot of time at the end of every week or every month going line by line what your spending is, or you think you should be doing that and you don't have time for it, this is absolutely for you. If you feel like you are living paycheck to paycheck, you're just kind of strapped between paydays, or you just feel like you are unprepared for future expenses, whether those are in the short term or the long term, this is going to be helpful. A little bit about me. My name is Jessica Medina. I am a practicing attorney, but for here, I'm a financial counselor and coach. I've been a licensed attorney practicing in the DC area for over 15 years. I spent 8 of those years at a large DC law firm. I then moved to the government and I was working in the United States Securities and Exchange Commission in their Division of Enforcement. I am now a candidate to become an accredited financial counselor, and doing these library presentations is helpful because it helps me get my practice hours. So thank you to Alexandria Library. I'm also a mom to twin teenagers, which is primarily important for all the balancing that I have to do in my own life. But one thing I always have disclaimers. I am an attorney, but these presentations and as I act as a financial counselor and coach, I do not give investment, tax, or legal advice. So this is just going to be about money today. So just to get started, 78% of Americans surveyed are living paycheck to paycheck. And this survey was done back in 2017, so before we were even dealing with COVID-19. So if this is your situation, I want you to know that you are not alone. It's not that, there's some miracle that people know about and it's just you who have missed the boat. There are a lot of your fellow Americans who are going through this same type of experience. And what we're going to learn today is hopefully going to help you avoid those situations. So let's talk about the typical paycheck cycle, right? You have your payday, it's always exciting, the money goes in and it just goes to all of the bills and everything else that you might end up buying over the course of that pay cycle. What happens when you have some sort of unexpected or irregular expense that comes up? Maybe you have a quarterly bill that comes up or you have a car repair that's needed. So either you have to drastically reduce your spending for that month, or you might have to borrow money to pay for it. Borrowing meaning using a credit card, taking out a loan, borrowing from friends and family. So now you're in the cycle where you have to add the interest from that borrowing, all the added cost of borrowing the money to cover the bill to your new monthly bills. And so you have even less money to live on each month, right? And then you hit another payday and it starts all over again. You have even less money to live on than you did last month. You're still covering the borrowing costs from having the crazy bill coming out, and we just rinse and repeat every single payday. So if this seems familiar, there is a better way. So let's talk a little bit about some balanced budget basics. I am a very big fan of Elizabeth Warren's book that she wrote with her daughter, Amelia, in 2005. It was called All Your Worth, The Ultimate Lifetime Money Plan. It is available in most local libraries, and I'm sure Allison has a copy or two in her library. But basically, the idea is to balance your budget. You want to look at 3 different categories of your spending. You have your needs, which are the things you absolutely have to pay. Your wants, those are all of your luxuries, things that you could get rid of if you had to, and then your shoulds, helping you plan for the future. And those 3 categories, you need to figure out what % of your after-tax income is going toward each of those categories. And so you take a look at your after-tax income, so what you get basically in your paycheck coming home with you, and figure out how much of that is going to each of these different spending categories. And if you are close to these ratios of 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% towards your shoulds, you should feel a little bit more in balance. So what goes into these 3 different categories? As I said, your needs are things you absolutely have to pay. Now that can sometimes take on different definitions. So when you say something that you absolutely have to pay, it's generally defined as your absolute necessities. So your housing, your utilities, your transportation, food, meaning food that you need to survive, not food at lovely restaurants. No, not now, maybe takeout, okay? So not takeout food, but also medical costs, insurance, the minimum amount that's due on any of your debt payments. So oftentimes you will, if you have a credit card, you'll get a credit card statement. It will have the minimum payment that's due. And of course you can pay more if you want, if you have an outstanding balance. So the minimum amount that is due from you goes into your needs calculation. And also any other legal obligations that you have. If you pay child support, if you signed a contract that would be very difficult to get out of, and so you're paying a certain amount of money every month, those go into what we call the needs category. And as I said, ideally, we want that category to take up about 50% of your take-home pay. The second category is what we call the wants. So those are the luxuries, however you define them, right? Everybody has their own idea of what feels luxurious, what they really like to splurge on. And I'm a big believer that that's exactly where you should be spending your money. You should get the most bang for your buck. So a luxury to you may be very different than a luxury to me. I can tell you my husband and I are very into competitive karaoke, which requires costumes and props and going out to karaoke evenings with other karaoke-minded friends. It's not inexpensive, but it's worth it to us. We love the community, and that's how we met, so we have a very strong connection to competitive karaoke. Absolutely a luxury, totally worth it. Eating out, travel, gifts, so trips to the salon. It may feel like a need right now if you haven't been in a while, but we still qualify it as a want. Any hobbies that you may enjoy, and also all of those subscriptions that we get wrapped up in terms of, you might have a subscription to a couple of different streaming TV services. You may have subscriptions to Audible. Hopefully not, right? You get everything you need from the library, but other podcasts or other types of kind of monthly subscriptions, those still qualify as wants. And that should be taking up about 30% of your take-home pay. So still a pretty good chunk because we want you to enjoy your life. Otherwise, what's the point? The last category is what we call the shoulds. So that is everything that you're putting toward savings, toward any investing that you're doing. Also included in that is your pre-tax savings. So some people are lucky enough to work at an employer that maybe lets them contribute to a retirement account before they even get taxed. So you want to include the money that you're putting in, and also if you get any employer match. So that would be pre-tax savings. And then you may have been wondering, well, what happens when you pay a little bit extra on your credit card? That goes into your shoulds. Any extra payments that you're putting toward paying down debt goes into your should category. Because this is basically a category to try to characterize things that you are doing to better your financial future, right? Things that you should be doing. So those are the things that go into that category. And we like to see that at about 20% of your take-home pay. Now, one thing that I want to say, these are benchmarks. Of course, it would be wonderful if we could all fit perfectly into these pegs of 50% wants, 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% shoulds. I'm perfectly in balance. This is the DC metro area. That may not be possible for every family, but this is something to strive for. And there may be different times in your life when these ratios just do not physically make sense. The idea, number one, is to figure out how far away are you? And if you're really far off, what kinds of things can we do to get you closer to these ideal benchmarks so that you hopefully experience a little bit more balance in your day-to-day? So what happens when your needs are actually more than 50% of your take-home pay? If this is your situation, you probably know exactly what it feels like. You feel trapped by your recurring bills. There's no way that you can really get out of the things that you have to pay. So by the time you're done paying the bills that you absolutely have to, most of your money is gone. It makes it very hard to get ahead of things. You may need to actually be shuffling money around to make ends meet each month. We talked about those irregular bills that come up unexpectedly or even expectedly. They can really rock your budget when so much of your money has to go to things that you absolutely have to pay. And part of that is just because there's very little wiggle room, right? If you need to repair your car and you don't have any money lying around waiting, there isn't something that you can say, oh, I won't pay that this month. Oh, I won't pay the water bill this month. That's not really an option. So when your needs are taking up that much of your take-home pay, it can feel very constrained. When you are spending less than 50% of your take-home pay on your needs, you're probably living very differently than your peers. This is not a typical scenario for most people, certainly not in this area. So the idea is that you are probably not keeping up with the Joneses, and hopefully you're okay with that because it's a really nice place to be in. And you should have lots of breathing room to adjust your spending as needed whenever there are any surprises. So let's talk about what it feels like when your wants are far off from the 30% benchmark. When you're over 30%, spending more than 30% of your take-home pay on all of those luxuries, you are probably enjoying your life very much, perhaps to the detriment of other goals. I love competitive karaoke, don't get me wrong, but I'd also like to help my kids go to college a little bit. And I won't be able to do all of that if all I'm doing is competitive karaoke. But when you're spending that much of your take-home pay on the luxury side of your balance sheet, you also may not be able to save any good amount each month. And you may find yourself just going out a bit less whenever something unexpected comes up because you have that wiggle room, right? So the wants are not things that you absolutely have to do. They're things you choose to do. And so maybe if, a car repair comes up, maybe you go out a few less times that month and you have some of that wiggle room. But that's how you deal with those types of expenses. When your wants are under 30%, which often happens in this area, you may feel deprived. Like you never really get to enjoy yourself. You work really, really hard. And at the end of the day, it all goes to things that you absolutely need in any way. But whether you were working, you would still have to find a way to cover it. You still have to house yourself. You still have to clothe yourself. You still have to eat food. You may not get to eat, out at a fancy restaurant, but you still got to eat something. And if you're spending less than 30% of your take-home pay on that luxury category, it may feel like you're working really, really hard and you don't have a lot of fun stuff to show for it. And that's a really hard place to be in. I have found meeting with my clients, I meet, of course, one-on-one with clients and with couples, also, people who are running families, and having very little money going toward the luxuries in life can feel like more work. And part of the whole point of the work is getting to the things that you really want to enjoy. So that can be a hard thing, and trying to bring my clients back into a little bit of balance hopefully helps them move forward and be really excited about all the things that they can do with their money. So now moving on to the last category, the shoulds, that wonderful category of things that we do because we should and because it's great for our future. So when you're saving or being very aggressive with your debt pay down strategies, again, you may feel deprived if you're pulling from that want category in order to raise up your should category. You're probably living well below your means if you have more than 20% of your take-home pay to put toward debt and savings. But you may be on the path to financial independence. I have one client who started out working with me, and he was saving roughly 20% of his take-home pay. I talked to him about what financial independence means, how quickly he might be able to achieve it, what that path would look like. And his savings rate is now a whopping 54% by design, because that's what's really important to him. And so he's decided that he's going to go without in some other areas because this is actually his want category. So that's how he thinks about it, and that's how he's balanced himself. Now, when your shoulds are tracking under 20% of your take-home pay, you may have little or no emergency funds for a rainy day. You may not be able to make progress on your debt. So you're going to pay those minimum payments because, that goes right into your needs category, but you're not going to be able to pay much more. And if anyone on here has ever had a credit card, you know that it can take about 30 years if all you're doing is paying the minimum on the card, right? That stuff just keeps building up and building up. So when your shoulds are under 20%, it can certainly feel, and it could be true, that you have very little money or no money going toward your future. And that's something that we want to adjust. So let's take a look at what some of the typical American family budget looks like. So these are national averages. This is not pulled from the DMV. I would love to hear from attendees what looks completely different than their budget from the typical American budget. But this information is pulled from the US Bureau of Labor. They do consumer studies, and this data comes straight from consumer spending. And so then they average it out. This is the monthly amount that the typical American family puts towards these various categories. So as you can see, we have $375 for groceries. They obviously don't go to Costco. Eating out at $290, maybe, okay, not bad. They're not going to Rose's Luxury, that's for sure. Housing, $1,675. I don't know many housing establishments in the DC metro area where it's just $1,675, but we're gonna use these numbers because they're real numbers. They come from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we're gonna just try to do a little bit of analysis of what this balancing looks like for a typical American budget. Oh, it has decided, there it is. So there's just a little bit of a different kind of breakdown of where the money is going. And this is, again, just for the typical budget. Your numbers will be different, but we've got a lot going to housing, we've got a lot going to transportation, healthcare, of course, is a major expense, groceries and eating out, but something is missing, and that thing that's missing is all of the savings that needs to be happening for somebody to ever be able to stop working. The savings that need to be happening if you ever want to have a different life circumstance other than living paycheck to paycheck. And that's what happens with the typical American budget. That's why there's so little savings, for the typical American family. And part of what we want to try to do now is fill in that hole and put those shoulds back in there so that we can get folks back on a good track so that they can feel good about their budget. So bear with me, we're gonna do some math. And I don't do math on the fly. I am a financial counselor, but it's more about the counseling. Of course, I run all of my numbers with my clients, but nobody wants to see me do math in a virtual presentation. So the average salary in the city of Alexandria is $72,000 a year. That is pre-tax. So we have to take out, we're gonna figure out what the after-tax income is. I used the typical spend amounts for the American family that we just went over. We were dealing with Virginia taxes for a single person. I had this family actually contributing a little bit to their employer 401k. So that's on a pre-tax basis. And also $400 per month for health insurance. Now, all of these numbers will vary. Of course, your numbers will be different. I included in the slides is a reference to any calculator or tool that I use to come up with any of these numbers. So that, of course, you would have this available to you if you request a copy of the slides. But let's just see kind of what happens. So we have our monthly after-tax income comes in at $4,050. Like I said, the pre-tax items that come out of your paycheck before it comes to you, you need to add those back in to get your total income that we're going to use for this analysis. So we started with the 40/50, but we add back in the health insurance and the 401k contributions. So your after-tax income is actually $4,600 for the month. Now, using those typical American budget numbers again, we get a total of needs for $3,500. That includes the $400 per month toward the health insurance that we have for this example. The wants, meaning the eating out and the entertainment, all the things from that list, total about $950 a month. And the shoulds, we actually do have some shoulds with this person because we had some pre-tax retirement contributions. So they were giving $150 toward their should category because that was their 401k. They weren't making any other, they weren't saving any other additional money. They weren't making any other pre-tax contributions. They weren't paying extra on any debts. So that was their whole should category. So this comes down to 76% of the budget is going toward things that we would characterize as needs, right? 21% is going toward wants and 3% going toward shoulds. So you can see just with this, taking a typical person in Alexandria that's really only spending the money that a typical American family spends, not necessarily what a typical DC metro area family spends. And they're already up at 76% on their needs alone. And that's got to come from somewhere, right? They do spend 20% on their wants. That's a healthy amount. So they do get to enjoy themselves a bit, but at the cost of their savings, at the cost of being able to make extra debt payments, at the cost of their financial future. So even using these very average spending amounts, we can see that this is probably a tough situation for this individual. And they're making $72,000 a year. That's hard. And, I don't want to sugarcoat it, especially here in these expensive cost of living areas. It's not easy to make all of the numbers work. But one of the great things about using a ratio, as opposed to saying, well, only spend this much or only spend this amount, is it's all going to be dependent on how much you bring in. So I get to do this analysis for all of my clients, regardless of what their income is, whether, they are below 72,000 or above 72,000. We always have this conversation because I think it's valuable. I often have people who are very surprised to see what their ratios end up being once we run all of the numbers. And then the goal is to rework the system and see what else we can do to try to get everybody a little bit more into balance. So when you walk away from this presentation, I would ask that you take some time to figure out where do you stand. And you're going to figure out your after-tax income the way that we've used it in this presentation. So you're going to start with your after-tax income, whatever you get in your paycheck coming home to you. You can do this on an annual basis using your entire annual pay, or you can do it on a monthly basis. I find monthly is easier for people to think about just because it's easier to think, well, how much do I go out per month as opposed to how much do I spend eating out per year? That's often a difficult thing to imagine in your brain. But then remember to add in any of those pre-tax deductions. So check your pay stub for any pre-tax retirement contributions, any employer matches to those count toward your shoulds because somebody's paying toward your future. Doesn't necessarily have to be you. Also the healthcare premiums, if you have any other pre-tax benefits like parking or anything like that, then you would add that in because that is money that counts as your income for this exercise. And then you're going to go through your expenses and you're going to calculate them out. So you're going to figure out your needs and your wants and your shoulds. You're going to divide each category by your total net income, which you got from putting all of your incomes together. And that's going to give you your ratio. And if, I would love to hear where people come out on their own ratios. My contact information is going to be in this presentation, of course. But I would love to hear, and if you have questions about how to do it, I'm happy to answer the questions at the end, but I would love to see where your numbers came out. I can tell you before I became a financial counselor, as I mentioned, I was an attorney. I was working at a large law firm, and then I moved to the government, which, to be fair, I was working at an agency that paid its attorneys very well. So I was still a fairly well-compensated attorney. That being said, I was a single mom of twin boys who never stopped eating. So lots of things going on there. And when I ran my own numbers, I realized that for myself, my wants were very low because I had already started kind of paring back my lifestyle. But my needs were really high. I had a mortgage, I had a car payment, I had large student loan minimum payments. And on top of that, I was saving too much money, which I didn't think was possible. But when I put all of my contributions together, my retirement, my boys' college savings fund, other savings that I have just for rainy days, that was well above 20%. And it made me realize, this is why I feel strapped. We never get to enjoy ourselves. I need to loosen the belt a little bit. And I know maybe this is sacrilege for a financial counselor to say, but it was important to me, it was important to my family that we don't just save money. That wasn't going to make for a very happy life. So I had to rebalance my own numbers. And part of the way that I did that was taking both from needs and from my shoulds. And just trying to figure out other ways that I could release some of those obligations that I already had in my life. But I will tell you, I have clients who, are really high on the needs and not so high on the shoulds. And I absolutely have clients who are actually higher on the shoulds. And maybe that is the reason why they don't feel in balance. So it's not necessarily going to be, oh, of course, it's your wants that are too high. In this area, it usually isn't the wants that are too high. It's usually the needs that are the major culprit. But it might be surprising what you find. And I would love to hear, from anybody. You can send me an email or, sign up for one of your free sessions, which will be offered at the end to see what your numbers were and, what your reactions were to it. But so that family was really out of balance. So what do we do to get ourselves closer to those benchmark numbers? What kind of strategies can we use? And one of the most powerful strategies is what's called values-based spending. So values-based spending is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's spending your money toward things that you really value. And there are different ways that different counselors may explain the concept, but that's really it at the core. And in order to do that, you have to first figure out, well, what are your values? Because you can spend your money on anything. You just can't spend your money on everything. And that's a really important concept, I think, for financial counseling as well as just life, right? I was a mom, I was an attorney, I tried to be a good friend, a good daughter, a good sister, all of those things. I probably had room for two of those in my life. And one was attorney, because that brought home the bacon, and two was a mom, because my kids were depending on me. And everything else had to kind of take a back seat. And those were my values. Now my life is very different. I am also married and my children are older and they don't need me as much. So my values themselves have changed a little bit over time, but I still hold true that I can get anything that I want. I just can't get everything that I want simultaneously in due time. And that's, having the values change over your life and checking back in with yourself is really important. But so in terms of an exercise, you want to think through, well, what do you value most? And I have some examples up here. This is by no means an exhaustive list of what you may value, but it's things to start thinking about so that you can really hone in on where you want to put your resources. And this applies to resources, whether they are time or money or energy. All of those things are important, and all of those things should be spent primarily in the areas that you value most. I recently did this exercise again because I just love doing all of these exercises. It's why I became a financial counselor in the first place. And after finally really going through it again, I realized, my children are a really big value for me. My career is a really big value for me. And freedom is a really big value for me. And that's why I do trainings on financial independence. It's why I spent a lot of years saving for my children's college education. We'll see if they get to go with COVID. But and my career, even though it's changed, I still put a lot of energy and money toward building a career that I'm proud of. And that was very clear to me when I looked at my budget and where my money was going, which was nice. So kind of a backwards way to figure it out. If you cannot figure out what your values are, I absolutely suggest that when you're doing your needs and wants and shoulds, figure out where your money is going. That may tell you what you value most. And if you're unhappy with that answer, then you're going to need to make some changes. So what are the actual steps? Well, pick your top 3 values. You can pick, just focus on one if money is really tight. I don't want people to think that they have to be funding absolutely everything, especially when you're getting started. And then figure out, okay, if this is my top value, how much am I actually putting toward that in my budget? If church and, God and religion is a very big value for you, are you tithing? Are you able to, actually give resources to something that provides you a lot of value? If your values are your children, how much are you spending toward their betterment? How much is going toward their future? Those are things to think about. So figuring out how much you're spending and how much is actually going toward your values is a really good exercise to, number 1, take a look at your budget, but number 2, make sure that you're really fulfilled and that your budget reflects that. And then once you've figured out how much you're spending on your values, you may find, wow, some of these are really, really underfunded. I am not putting nearly enough money toward these things that I say that I value. Then we're going to go through and we're going to start cutting other stuff, right? And we need to be ruthless because we've already seen it's tight, right? All the budgets are tight, especially in this area. It's not uncommon. And so, figuring out other ways where we can slash things, but hold on to the spending in your values categories. That's what's important. And that's what will make sure that you don't feel like you're being deprived, and that money won't feel wasted because it's going towards something that's very important to you. And check in periodically. Like I said, I've had my core values change over time, over changes in careers, over changes in life circumstances. So, just because you pick 3 today doesn't mean that these will be the same 3 values that you have 10, 15, or 20 years from now. Check back in with yourself. Do the exercise again. Check your budget, check your spending, and make sure that you're funding those values because they really are important and they're going to give you the most bang for your buck. So we figured out our values, we're super excited, and now we're ready to start slashing. Where do we do the slashing so we can get more into balance? I always ask my clients to start by rethinking the big things. I am not a proponent of cutting out lattes to bring your needs from 76% down to 50%. That's not going to happen. But there are often very large, regular expenses that if you can make a dent in those, that's going to give you really, really good return and free up some money in your budget for your values, for those other categories. Housing, of course, often the biggest expense. Can you take on a roommate? Can you relocate? It's a big decision, but if you are finding that your needs are 75, 80, 85% of your take-home pay, that kind of a situation is untenable. And that kind of a situation is an indication in and of itself that something big needs to change. So it's a hard conversation to have with yourself. It's certainly a hard conversation that I have to have with my clients, but it's important. And it can provide so much relief now and in the future if some of those big decisions can be made. But also, if housing, not an option, can't make any changes, review your other fixed costs. Like insurance, your utilities, looking for better deals, reevaluate your benefits. There's often an idea that once we sign a contract or we have something that we're paying for regularly, well, that's the way that it is. That's how much that bill costs. So it automatically goes into the budget. I always ask people to revisit this. This is just like revisiting your values. Revisit your spending in different categories. Is there a better deal out there? Are there new competitors in the market that are offering better cable or better phone service? Is there a different way that you can approach something that seemed necessary before? Cable is an excellent example. Many people are now coming around to cutting the cord from cable. They still need internet, but cutting the cord from the 250 channels that they don't really watch, and maybe adding in, one streaming service and saving, if you can save $20, $30 a month over the years, that really adds up. And that's the stuff that goes into your need category. So taking a look at those things that appear to be fixed in your budget and seeing if they're really fixed can have really big returns. I can give you another story from my own experience when I finally sat down and actually looked at my health insurance, because who wants to read all the health insurance stuff? What a nightmare. There's so many forms and there's so many different plans and they all look very different. I would always just buy the most expensive one because I assumed I needed it. I assumed that if anything ever happened to me, it would give me the best coverage. And I paid through the nose for the premiums. And when I finally went through all the paperwork, all of my doctors were available on the middle of the road plan. And I saved hundreds of dollars per month on premiums that didn't have to be paid into the Cadillac plan. But I never would have known if I hadn't actually gone through the exercise of taking a look at it, figuring out what I really need, and slashing things when I could. So that's another example of what we sometimes think of as fixed costs that aren't really fixed at all. And if we can loosen them a little bit, they can really give us a big return. Also, transportation. We saw in the typical American budget, transportation was a big fraction of that. And if transportation is a big expense, is it possible to live without a car or live possibly with one less car than you may have? Many families have more than one car. Taking public transportation more, maybe not getting rid of the car, but just using it less. Those are things to think about. They sound radical, but they also have a radical effect on your budget. Thinking about refinancing loans to get better interest rates. Now is a wonderful time to look at refinancing all kinds of things because interest rates are at record lows. Now, it's a slog of a process to go through, and of course, it is absolutely dependent on your individual circumstances. I am not advising people to go out and refinance everything. Absolutely not. All of this is individualized, and financial counselors can help you think through whether refinancing makes sense depending on what types of offers you can qualify for. But now, of all times, is certainly, if you were ever considering refinancing, this is a great time to go shop around for lower interest rates. And that will just automatically lower your monthly payments and improve that cash flow and free up money for those other categories. Also, thinking about canceling the long-term contracts, right? Opting for pay-as-you-go so that you can get out of something if you're not using it anymore. An excellent example is gym memberships, right? If you sign up for 2 years of a gym and you feel like you're strapped in, if you're not really using it, well, maybe you can go month to month and then just cancel. Or just cancel automatically. Right now, no one's using the gym. And hopefully anybody who has a membership is either been refunded or at least given some other benefit for the fact that they cannot use the facilities for which they are paying. That's a little bit of a lawyer in me. But always want to make sure that you guys are getting what you pay for. But thinking about those long-term contracts that you may have signed, those obviously lock you in for extended periods. They have penalty fees. Sometimes it may be a better idea to just find something where you can have some flexibility to walk away when you're ready. So those are the big things. Reducing wants. This is what everyone talks about, right? Well, just drink less coffee or don't go out to eat as much. That, yes, will probably have some sort of a tiny dent in your budget. But when you're looking to reduce your wants, I want you to think about rethink what luxury means to you. Revisit your values and make sure that you are slashing spending in any of those areas that don't line up with those values, but also make sure that you're retaining the things that feel truly luxurious to you, because a little bit of luxury will feel much better than a lot of want spending in a category that you're not really interested in. There are plenty of resources out there in terms of how to get creative with food spending and food budgets, in terms of eating out less and meal planning tips, and changing what type of grocery store you go to or what items you get at which grocery store. Of course, in terms of entertainment, finding free activities in your area, like your local library, lots of free entertainment at your library, but also going through those monthly subscriptions and being ruthless. Are you really using the service? Is it a value of yours? If you are a musician, then it might make sense for you to pay for a premium music service. But if you can handle some commercials every now and then, maybe you can get away with the free versions and it won't really be that much of an inconvenience, but it will free up all that money in your budget. So I always have my clients ruthlessly go through, check their credit card and their bank statements for all of those automatic charges that they might not even remember are coming out, and slash them if they're not absolutely necessary, because we have other things that we want to fund, the things that are truly luxurious to us, and those things are reflected in our values. So again, when you're looking to get in balance, we have to work on shifting those ratios. We need to get a little bit closer to our benchmarks, because that's really when we're going to start to feel in balance. So thinking about reducing your needs, like we talked about, that's going to have the most long-lasting effect on your overall cash flow. So although it takes more work because it usually involves research, you might have to go through a refinance process, you might have to move, all of those things can be very painful in the moment, but the return on that investment of time and energy is huge and can make a really, really big difference in your overall budget. Again, reducing your wants, that's pretty straightforward. The only thing that's different here is we want to make sure that you are focusing on your top values when you are revising what you're going to reduce your spending on and what you're going to maintain. So keep your spending in the categories that relate to your actual values, and then ruthlessly cut everything else, because it will be much easier to cut everything if you know that the things that are most important to you are actually getting funded. And if you do those two things, you're going to free up money in your should category automatically, whether that money goes into short-term savings, goes into long-term savings like retirement, or for college, or for investment property, whatever that is. You'll be able to make extra debt payments because the money will automatically be freed up. And since you've already funded your values, you now have extra money that you can put toward all of those shoulds that maybe have not been getting as much attention as we would hope. So going back to the typical American budget, I did some tweaking. Now, of course, all of this is just an example. There's only so much that we can change for, families all over the place, but lowering the eating out, lowering the clothing budget. One of the big things that I did was I lowered the transportation. So either getting rid of a car or refinancing cars that, maybe had very high interest when they were purchased, or, spending less on gas. Transportation is something where you probably have more flexibility than you may think that you do. And it's a really good area to think about. Also lowering the healthcare costs from $400 down to $200, maybe getting a different plan that still provides all the benefits that you need, lowering entertainment. But I left a lot of the categories exactly as they were, and we freed up another $1,000 to put toward whatever we wanted. So this is the miscellaneous savings category now. And that was just from making a few changes to some of those needs and some of those wants categories. So now the pie is still a whole lot of housing, but that's because a lot of the other categories have been ruthlessly cut to make sure that we're lining up with this person's values and making sure that we're freeing up money for the shoulds, because that's what was missing before. So now revisiting this sample budget, we've got still the same salary, still $150 per month going toward the 401k pre-tax, but now it's $200 per month for health insurance. So that changes some of the other numbers. And you can see, I don't need to walk you through all of the, all of the amounts, but the person ends up at 59% toward needs as opposed to 76, 11% toward wants. So still, less than the 21 for sure. But that's because a lot more has gone now toward your shoulds. They got 25%. Which is, over what you would normally expect for kind of the perfectly balanced budget. In this example, they also had a surplus of money that wasn't going toward anything. So they had an extra $221. So that can go into their wants category. Go out to eat a couple more times, go see a show. Well, not right now, but the post-COVID budget. One day we will spend money on entertainment again. And when that happens, they'll have some extra money to go toward it. So this is just an example of how a couple of tweaks to the budget can really change the ratios. And the idea is that, this person still gets to live their life. They still get to fund their values, but they've ruthlessly cut in other areas. And now they should be feeling way more imbalanced because they not only are covering all their needs, They're still getting some luxury in their life. They're also planning for their future. So let's just say, oh, this person is still out of balance. There is nothing that we can do. There's no more that we can cut. We're down to the bone. We live in the DC metro area. There aren't a lot of options. We're gonna have to earn more money. I always ask my clients, are you more inclined to reduce spending or earn more income? And I probably have about an even split between the two different preferences. So we always start with whatever their preference is. One thing that I will say is earning more income has an unlimited capacity, right? I can reduce spending down to 0, and then I'm done reducing spending. There's nothing more that I can do. But in terms of earning more income, that can free up your budget in a way that reducing spending cannot necessarily. So always a good thing to think about. Different ways to increase your income. You want to be creative. Like I said, it has twofold benefits, right? You're going to have more money to put toward your expenses and has absolutely unlimited potential. But so thinking about, well, what can I do to earn more income in the short term and in the long term, right? Asking for a raise or a promotion, getting more education, selling stuff online. There's a lot happening online right now, but also starting a side hustle using skills that you already have. Before I left the practice of law, I began as a financial counselor, and it was my side hustle. It's now my only hustle. So trying to make that work is a little bit different. But think about things that you already have skills that you could be doing on a part-time basis or as a consultant, or things that you enjoy, hobbies that you already have where somebody might, pay you for your skills. That's the essence of a side hustle. And there's an entire other training on how to figure out the side hustle for you and how to start it and how to get it going. But something to think about if you really are still feeling strapped, you probably just need to earn more income. So a quick tutorial, now that you have finally gotten your numbers, you think where you want them, you're very excited about your needs and your wants and your shoulds, everything seems like it's in balance, but that's on a monthly basis. That's a snapshot of your finances at a moment. What do you do on a day-to-day basis to make sure that you stay in balance? And this is a cash flow management system that I teach all of my clients. So you guys are basically getting one of my client sessions for free today. This is the secret sauce that I teach my clients on how to manage their money. There are 4 different types of expenses or money that you save for the future. And so this is how I have my clients think about their bills when they're trying to organize their money. They figured out where their money is going. They feel like they have a good balance for their ratios. And now we have to figure out, what are we going to do on payday? So you want to go through your budget and you want to separate all of the things that you spend money on, whether it's spending money on expenses and bills or food, groceries, or saving money, and you want to put them into one of these 4 categories. You want to think about your monthly bills. Those are your recurring fixed bills. These are the things that you pay possibly automatically, or you get the bill every month, it's the same amount, and when it's coming, you know how much it's going to be. This also includes any of those minimum debt payments for credit cards or for loans or any other debts that you have. The second category is discretionary spending. So it's consistent spending, meaning you spend money in this category all the time, but the amount that you spend may vary from week to week. So this covers things like groceries. Maybe one week you do go to Costco, so you spend $200, but the next week you just go to your Giant and you spend $50 on produce. So you're spending money on food every week, but it's a different amount. Things like gas. You don't fill up at the same time every single month unless you're very regimented. And certainly the amount won't be the same because the gas prices fluctuate. Things like entertainment, you don't, well, no one's going to the movies right now, but when we go to the movies again, you might not go every single week on the same day. So those are things that vary, but are pretty consistent on average. And for this category, you might be using a credit card right now. I always suggest that my clients use debit cards because for this type of spending, just because it's easier to track, but I absolutely have clients who use credit cards for it, and there is a workaround. And the third category are sinking funds. So this is your short-term savings. And this is the magic bullet that will take care of all of those weird, irregular, but expected expenses that come up over the rhythm of the year. So things like holiday shopping, or your annual family trip, any other travel that, you know, is not emergency travel, things like your insurance premiums. I don't know about you guys, but I pay my car insurance twice a year, and ooh, it's a doozy. If I had to pull that money out of my monthly regular budget, I don't know what we would be eating. We'd be eating a lot of rice and beans that month, that's for sure. So instead, we need to develop a sinking fund so we can pay that bill in the future. The last category are your long-term savings. So this is your emergency fund and also savings for anything that is well past 5 years out. So retirement, any other investments that you're looking at making, college savings, things like that. Those are going to go into your long-term savings accounts. So you can think of these 4 different buckets, and they all have a different job. So it's different than the needs and the wants and the shoulds. That's one analysis. That just has to do with kind of where does your money go over the course of the month, over the course of the year, to help you feel in balance. These 4 buckets are about actually managing your money as it comes in and goes out the door. So I don't want folks to confuse the 2 different concepts. They're 2 different processes. And this is a diagram that kind of shows you how these accounts work. So normally I have my clients, and this also works for couples. You might have to add a couple accounts in there to accommodate, but it generally works for everyone and fairly straightforward once you get everything down. So you start with your income account in the center. That's probably a checking account. You have your paychecks deposited there, whatever money you're making. Moving up to the top of the chart is your monthly bills. So that's going to be some sort of a checking account where you can have those automatic payments made out of there directly. And as you can see, this is for your regular monthly bills, and you want to maintain a balance in this monthly bills checking account of at least 1 month of bills. That's the ideal. That's what we work toward once we get everything in balance, and then we set up that cushion for you in your checking account. Some people also just have this as their income account. That's okay, but you know, separating it is part of the ideal. Moving over to the right-hand side, you can see the discretionary account. This I prefer to be a checking or a debit account, though some people do use credit cards, but that's going to be, again, for kind of those weekly variable expenses, food, gas, going out or takeout, or all of those miscellaneous things that pop up. That you're going to decide what your monthly amount is, and you want to deposit, you know, a quarter of that every week, or you want to do it on your payday of how much you're going to need before the next payday to make sure that you have that money separated. Separating the money is going to make sure that you can keep track of exactly what's going on with that variable spending. Oftentimes, when you have one account and all the money comes out of it, it can be very difficult to see, well, how much am I spending on groceries? How much am I spending on gas? I don't really know. Do I have money left for all the bills for the month? When we separate them in this way, it's very, very easy to see exactly where you are at any time of the month. And that's part of the beauty of this system. You no longer have to be doing calculations in your head about whether you have enough money for something. You should know fairly quickly. Over on the left side, you see the sinking funds. This is basically accessible savings accounts. So these are buckets of money that we stash away for any expenses that we're expecting to happen over the course of the next 5 years. So if you have any big trips that you're saving for, if you happen to be saving for a wedding or a honeymoon, you're saving for a down payment, you want to have money available for home repairs or car repairs or holiday shopping, this is where you put that money. So the sinking funds, they are savings accounts, but you're saving the money to be spent within the next 5 years. That's what differentiates it from the other types of savings accounts. Moving down to the bottom, you have your emergency fund, which we always recommend go into a high yield savings account because that money really should just sit there. It shouldn't do anything unless there's an emergency. And if you came to my earlier training on financial strategies during COVID, you would know we're in an emergency. So if you happen to have had an emergency account and you needed to tap into it, good job. This was the time. This counts as an emergency. It's okay. That's what that money was for. But normally speaking, that's not money that we try to tap into unless we're in an emergency. And we like to see at least 1 month of your needs expenses in there to start, right? And you would already have that number because you've already done your needs, wants, shoulds analysis. So you'll have your number of what you need to have to start out in your emergency account. And the last type of account are your long-term savings. Those are your investments. So anything that you're saving for more than 5 years out into the future, that you're going to want to put into a type of account that is not just, earning 1% interest, because that's going to have a very hard time keeping up with inflation. And you'll want to talk to a financial advisor to see what types of investments make sense for you, for your risk profile, for the type of investor that you are, and for your long-term goals. So as you can see, there's 5 to 6 different accounts that you need because they all have a very specific job. And one of the great things about a system like this, many of us are used to just kind of popping onto our banking app, checking the balance, and that is supposed to give us some sort of indication about how we're doing. And it does in a system like this. In a system like this, you know exactly where you are throughout the month because all of the money has a different job. And it's very clear to see how much money you have in each account, what it's going to be used for. And you'll know, your monthly bills will always be covered because you already have your 1 month cushion in there. So that's one of the simpler ways. Even though it's more accounts, it makes it easier for you to manage what's going on with your cash flow. So what do we do on payday? All right, you get your payday. So you're going to be moving whatever the specified amount was from your income to your monthly bills account. So we would have figured out before. This is an exercise I do with my clients, of course, and we figure out exactly what their numbers are. What are the transfer amounts? How often do they have to happen? And what does that look like? Second step is you're going to move your money to your discretionary account. So you have your money for your food, you have your money for your gas, and it's already a set amount. You're going to move your money toward your sinking funds. What short-term savings goals do you have to hit, in this short-term period? What are you saving for, that's maybe a year out? How much of your payday goes toward those goals? Your long-term savings, same thing. You're going to move your specified amount, whatever we've determined for your long-term planning goals, that's going to go in there. For some people, it will go in automatically. If you're doing pre-tax contributions, those would already be taken care of for you. But to the extent that you are making, any other savings, long-term savings goals, or if you're investing in an independent brokerage account, something separate from your employer, then that's when you would handle the long-term savings. And then at the end of the month, you get to see whether you have a surplus or not, right? If you have money sitting in your income account still that hasn't been doled out to one of your other buckets, that means you have some extra money. So that money can either go to your maybe your long-term savings, maybe it goes toward a new sinking fund, or you add more money to a travel account. Maybe you use that money that month because you didn't go out very much, and everybody would like one more order of takeout at the end of the month, and you have a little bit of surplus. But the way you figure out where that surplus is going to go is, again, you check back in with your values. Where would you like to spend a little bit more money? Where would you like to fund a value a little bit more than it is right now? And that's what you use your end of the month surplus toward. So some best practices for this system. Automate as much as possible. I love automatic bill pay. I love not having to worry that I'm going to miss a payment or be late to a payment. Now I say that with the caveat that automation works when you have appropriate cushions in place. Nobody wants to have somebody pulling money out of your checking account if you don't have the money there. So that's something that I work on with my clients to make sure that we have the right amount in the right accounts at the right time. And starting out with automation may not be the first step until you have that cushion built up and you can be very comfortable that whenever anybody pulls money out of there, there's absolutely going to be enough. But that's why, again, the second point, you want to keep a cushion. 1 month of bills in your monthly bills account, and then you're going to check the balance at the end of every month. Anything over that cushion amount, that's your surplus. If you are using a credit card for those discretionary purchases, that discretionary spend account, try to only use one credit card. It's much easier to keep track of the spending. You can see where you are, but also don't wait until the end of the statement to pay the balance, because then you might get a bit of a surprise about what you've been doing all month. Instead, what you want to do is you want to pay it off weekly at least, or every other week according to your payday. That way, number one, you'll avoid any interest charges, but also you'll see how much you're actually spending, and you'll know whether you're staying in line with what you've set out for yourself for your discretionary spend amount. It's much easier to track that way. With respect to the emergency fund, as we said, we want to start with 1 month of your needs. So when you pull the amount from your needs analysis, your needs, wants, and shoulds analysis, how much was 1 month of my needs? That's the beginning of my emergency fund if I don't have one right now. And then slowly increase it to 3 to 6 months. So if, God forbid, something else like this happens and people are out of work for months at a time, you still have your cushion to take care of you. But the idea of this system is you should be able to simply check your account balances and know exactly where you stand at any time of the month. That's why we pay off the discretionary spend credit card on a regular basis. That's why we have a month of monthly bills in there. We know where the numbers should be, and you should be able to just pop into your banking app and see exactly where you are and know that you're on track. I also always make sure that my clients are patient. This kind of a system, ideally, everyone has thousands and thousands of dollars just lying around so they can create all the cushions, they can set up all the automatic payments, they can make everything perfect right off the bat. It's generally not how it works, right? We got to do a little bit of work, we got to do some trimming, maybe we need to earn a little bit more income, we have to create that cushion. And that's a process, but it's an important process. And if you're patient, you should absolutely reward the progress, right? The first time that you see a 1 month of bills cushion in your checking account, you should find a way to celebrate. When you hit your sinking funds savings goals, you should find a way to celebrate. When you get that irregular bill and you're able to easily pay it out of one of your sinking funds, you should celebrate. And just the feeling of being able to easily pay it, knowing it doesn't have to come out of your grocery budget, should be a good feeling. But also, you should also be proud of yourself, and we should figure out ways that you can celebrate it. So going through some resources, I already mentioned All Your Worth, The Ultimate Lifetime Money Plan by Elizabeth Warren and her daughter Amelia Warren Tiagi. Also, another great book just for general personal finance knowledge and a little bit more about how to try to ruthlessly cut some of these expenses. I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. He's a big proponent of automation. He's a big proponent of letting money do its own work, which I am as well. So I also recommend that book. It's also available at your local library. Might be a wait, but definitely available. And also the Choose FI, FI stands for Financial Independence. They have an entire course to help you become familiar with personal finance topics and how to think about your money. And especially if you're interested in the concept of financial independence, we have a training on the library's YouTube channel specifically on the Financial Independence Retire Early movement, FIRE. So you can check that out. But this is a great resource to the extent that you're looking at, maybe not retiring at the typical 65 or 70, and you want to see some different strategies of how you could get there faster. I also want to do a shout out to the AFCPE. That's the Association of Financial Counseling and Planning Education. They are the organization that will be certifying me as an accredited financial counselor. They are currently offering free financial counseling to anyone who has been affected by COVID. So anyone can get free financial counseling through a joint venture with the Yellow Ribbon Network, which primarily works with military families, but this is available to everyone, and also supported by Wells Fargo. You will be basically connected with a counselor, an AFC certified counselor. So I participate in the program. You might not be connected with me specifically, but you'll be connected with somebody who has my credentials. And they offer you, soup to nuts financial counseling. So if you need help with your budget, if you need help with your savings goals, if you've lost income because of COVID and you're trying to figure out how to make ends meet, they have resources available for that. It's absolutely free. And you just have to sign up at the link. So the link will be, of course, in these slides, and we'll be making the slides available to anybody who's interested just by emailing the library. But I want to make sure that you're aware of that resource because there are wonderful AFC certified counselors available, and they really are, they're excellent resources for any personal finance issues. And finally, this is my contact information. I do want to make sure that you guys all know you can get a free counseling session with me for a full hour where we can talk about your situation. If you have any particular personal finance issues that you're struggling with or you've always had questions about, I'm happy to sit down with anybody who sat with me for an hour to talk about budgeting and values-based spending. You can email me and you can set up a free consult on my website, www.jessicamedinallc.com, and just mention Beatly. And then I'll know that this is where you came from and you'll be able to qualify for the free 1 hour session. And Allison, did you want to do questions now? Did you want to go through the library resources as well?
We can go ahead and do questions now.
Okay.
I think most people should be able to unmute themselves if you want to ask a question. If you just click on the participants button, you should be able to unmute yourself. You can also, if you're having trouble, there's a little hand wave icon that you can click that then I can unmute you.
I also completely understand if there are no questions to be made in this public forum that's being recorded. That's what the free sessions are for. So if you have questions about your particular numbers and you prefer to speak to me in private, of course, that's what those sessions are for. But if anyone had questions about what we went over today, something they'd like to get answered right now, I'm happy to answer.
I see that Gina is raising her hand. I believe you're unmuted, Gina, if you want to try to speak.
Sure. I thought it was interesting you have 12 participants here, and when I look through, there don't seem to be any men. Is that correct? I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, it looks, I don't see any names that scream man to me. So yeah, it looks like mostly women at least.
And I appreciate your value-based budget and the percentages. I do a lot of work, and I can say my budget has drifted. My husband died a couple years ago, and I'm managing the estate, trying to get it out of probate and liquidate things. So I have a budget for that. I have a budget for myself, but I haven't felt in control of it. So I really appreciate that because I'm trying to discover my values and put my money where my mouth is. So thank you for this. I found this very helpful.
Absolutely. And it may change for you, Gina, right? The things that that you used to spend money on may be very different than what you spend money on now. And that's okay. But the first step, I think you've already recognized it, is just figuring out what's going on. And sometimes having a little bit of a benchmark, they're benchmarks. They're not going to be perfect for everyone at every stage in life, but they may help explain why you're feeling a certain way. I know that for me, it was very helpful to have somebody, it was just clarifying, like, oh, this is why I feel completely strapped, because I'm saving too much money, which was completely eye-opening for me. I never even realized that was a thing. And so, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I hope that they're helpful, but I don't want anyone to beat themselves up if they can't get to the 50, 30, 20. That is not the ideal for everyone, but it probably feels pretty good.
No, I really appreciate it. It was a different way to think about it. And I, instead of thinking, how much do I want to spend on housing? How much do I have to spend on transportation, clothes, food, all that kind of stuff. So I thought your approach was, it's easier to put a handle on it.
Thank you. Well, we're trying to get you away from having to do those line items. If it's at all possible. You got to do a little bit of analysis, but then we're hoping that, things can coast a little bit more easily.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, this is Georgia May. I have a question for you, Jessica.
Yeah.
Going back to the chart you had there listing the typical American budget from the Bureau of Labor Statistics,
mm-hmm.
Can we go there and get a listing of what it should be for a single person? You had that, it was early on in the presentation. Yes.
Oh,
So,
this is the one that I revised.
Yeah, it was earlier on. And so are there, sample budgets there for a person based on the region of the United States, based on a single house, single earner, one person? Is that what we can look at as a sample?
So the averages are across the United States, but they will break down. They have for different years, and they may break down for spending for a family. I'm not sure if they break it down to that level, but it is a long report, and the link is available in the slides. So you can absolutely check the original source and see if there are other nuggets in there that would be helpful.
Do you know of a place where we could get what it should cost for a person here on the East Coast, or even in this DC metro region, one person, on one salary, how we can get an idea of how much we should be spending?
I'm not sure if there are more local organizations who maybe have pulled that data, or if it has been parsed. It would be a lot to parse it across all of the different regions. So I'm not sure if that resource is available, but it's certainly something that I can look into. And if you're comfortable emailing the library and letting them know your email address, I'm happy to look into it for you to see if I can track down something for you.
I will do that. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. The lady before me asked it. It kind of asked it. We put the for a family what the average income was for the expenses. So was that the 72,000 that you pulled from the Bureau of Labor Statistics? Was that their annual salary?
Yeah. That was the annual salary. I want to say for 2000. No, I'm sorry. The 72,000 is the average salary in Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay, but when you put the dollar amounts and then the percentages, what was the average annual salary for that group of people?
Oh, for the typical American family, the average salary I believe was in the range of 78,000 for 2019.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, regarding that resource, Choose FI, you say that's a series of classes?
Yes, they have a free kind of a webinar series. So it takes you through a couple of different personal finance topics, and also helps you understand if you're interested in financial independence specifically, meaning getting to a point where your passive income can pay for your lifestyle. That type of analysis and those types of strategies are covered in the Choose FI course.
Okay, and so one can start this at any time, or is it run at a certain period?
No, it's available virtually at any time.
From the Alexandria Library site?
Oh no, this is through the Choose FI organization.
Oh, it's an organization. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. They're very interested in providing education on personal finance issues to everyone and getting everyone financially independent. Any other questions? I apologize for the lightning slides, but you guys are familiar with all of these, and I've got to get Allison to her library slide.
Okay, so first of all, thank you everyone for coming tonight. I just wanted to do a few plugs for the library. As you see on this page here, we have our website is alexlibraryva.org. And if you put that in /events/virtual, you will see all the programs that we are currently offering online. We have them for children, for adults, everything from financial programs like this one, to book clubs, to magic shows for the kids, for summer reading, all kinds of different things. Also, if you visit our website /digital-collection, you can see all the ebooks and e-audiobooks that you can download without having to come into the library or touch anything. Additionally, we have recently reinstituted curbside service. So if you do want physical materials, you can you can place books on hold and set up a curbside appointment to pick them up. And as Jessica said, it's a good way to cut your budget. If you need to get rid of Netflix or Hulu, you can check out DVDs at the library, check out books, check out audiobooks, get rid of the Audible subscription. And again, our email here, reflib@alexlibraryva.org, if you would like copies of the slides. Additionally, I do send out, at this point, I'm sending out monthly an email with all the different financial events that we are offering virtually. So if you'd like to be added to that, just let me know at this email address. And if you have any kind of questions or would like to be put in touch with Jessica or just get the slides, feel free to email at reflib@alexlibraryva.org. All right, so I believe that is the conclusion of our program for tonight. Again, I'd like to thank Jessica for another wonderful presentation, and we hope to see you at some programs in the future.
Yes, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you very much.